The shot missed by 4 inches. Silence fell across the high desert range like a held breath. Dust hung suspended in the dry Nevada air, golden in the late afternoon sun that cut harsh shadows across the scrubland. The target, a steel plate barely visible as a shimmer of heat 3,000 meters downrange, remained untouched, unmarked, mocking. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Trent lowered his binoculars. His jaw worked beneath weathered skin, chewing words he wouldn't say. Around him, 12 Navy SEALs stood in various states of stillness, sweat darkening their tactical shirts despite the cooling hour. They'd been here since dawn. The wind had been their enemy all day, shifting, unpredictable, dancing across the volcanic rock formations like it had a mind of its own. "Winds reading 8.2 from the northwest," called out Petty Officer First Class Davis from the spotting position. His voice carried the flatness of repeated failure. "Gusting to 12. Trent didn't respond. He'd heard it the first 7 times. The rifle, a custom MK-15 chambered in 338 Lapua Magnum, lay on its bipod before the shooting platform, still warm from the last attempt. Standard issue for the unit's long-range specialists, capable of consistent hits at 2,500 meters in good conditions, in theory. This wasn't good conditions. This was the culmination of 3 weeks of specialized training at the Naval Special Warfare Center's Advanced Precision Rifle course. The final qualification. The shot that separated the adequate from the exceptional. 3,000 meters, just under 2 miles. At that distance, gravity pulled a bullet nearly 200 feet downward. Wind drift could push it off target by yards. The Coriolis effect, the rotation of the Earth itself, became a mathematical variable that couldn't be ignored. 7 men had attempted it today. 7 failures. "Morrison's up next," Trent announced, his voice cutting through the desert quiet. Chief Petty Officer Jake Morrison stepped forward. 34 years old, 14 years in the teams, with deployment scars that told stories he didn't share. He'd made shots most men couldn't imagine. Fallujah, Helmand Province, other places that stayed classified. But this range, this distance, this wind, it was humbling even him. He settled behind the rifle with practiced efficiency, cheek weld solid, breathing controlled. His spotter, Petty Officer Rodriguez, pressed against him shoulder to shoulder, reading the wind flags dotted across the range at 500-meter intervals. "Winds dropped to 7 knots, Rodriguez murmured, holding steady from 305 degrees. Morrison made micro-adjustments to his scope. His finger rested outside the trigger guard, waiting, feeling. The best shooters didn't rush. They became part of the environment, sensing the moment when all variables aligned. He exhaled halfway and held it. The shot cracked across the range, sharp, authoritative, fading into distance. 3 seconds of silence. At 3,000 meters, the bullet's time of flight approached 4 seconds, traveling at speeds that started supersonic and degraded to merely very fast. The steel target remained silent. "Miss," Rodriguez confirmed through the spotting scope. "Low and right, maybe 6 inches. Morrison rolled away from the rifle, his expression carved from stone. He didn't curse or show frustration. That wasn't how SEALs operated, but his hands shook slightly as he stood, from tension, not fear. From the accumulated weight of a day spent chasing perfection that seemed just beyond reach. Trent checked his watch. 16:47 hours. The light was fading. They had maybe 90 minutes before shadows would make accurate spotting impossible. 8 shooters had attempted the qualification. 8 failures. This was supposed to be the elite. The men who dropped into hostile territory at midnight and completed missions, nobody else could. But this shot, this single, distant, almost theoretical shot, was breaking them. "Sir," ventured Davis, the youngest of the group at 26, "maybe we should consider—" "Nobody's quitting," Trent interrupted. His tone wasn't harsh, just final. "We've got time. Someone's making this shot today." That's when they noticed her. She'd been there all day, technically, moving through the background like a shadow nobody quite registered. The woman in worn work pants and a faded canvas jacket, who'd arrived that morning in a civilian pickup truck that had seen better decades. She'd carried cleaning supplies, a toolbox, spare targets, range staff, maintenance. The kind of person elite operators learned not to see because acknowledging support personnel meant acknowledging they weren't entirely self-sufficient. She'd cleaned the spotting stations while they shot, replaced wind flags when one tore loose, stayed quiet and out of the way, like good support staff did. Native American, probably. High cheekbones, bronze skin, black hair pulled back in a practical braid. Late 20s, maybe early 30s. Too old to be fresh out of boot camp, too young to be retired. Now she stood near the ammunition supply point, watching, not with the casual interest of someone passing time, with focus. With the kind of attention that made men who noticed attention for a living suddenly notice her. "The range maintenance observing?" Rodriguez asked quietly. Trent followed his gaze. "Apparently." She moved then, walking toward the firing line with a confidence that didn't match her role. Not aggressive, just certain. Like she'd made a decision and was following through. In her hands, she carried something wrapped in canvas. The SEALs watched. It wasn't hostile scrutiny exactly, but it wasn't welcoming either. This was their world, their challenge, their failure. An outsider approaching their space created automatic barriers. She stopped 10 feet from the firing line. "Permission to speak, sir?" Her voice carried traces of an accent that didn't quite fit anywhere specific. Soft but clear, respectful but not subservient. Trent turned fully to face her. "Your range maintenance." "Yes, sir." "Then maintain. We're in the middle of a qualification." "I can see that, sir." She shifted the canvas bundle slightly. "I also see you're fighting a wind pattern that changes every 4 to 7 minutes. The geology here creates a venturi effect through those rock formations to the northwest. The wind accelerates and twists. You can't predict it with instruments." The SEALs exchanged glances. It wasn't that she was wrong. They'd noticed the unpredictable shifts. It was that she'd noticed them noticing. "Appreciate the observation," Trent said with the polite dismissiveness of a man who'd heard enough theories. "We'll adapt." She didn't leave. "The shot's possible, sir. Just not the way you're attempting it." That got attention. Morrison, still frustrated from his miss, spoke before thinking. "You shoot?" Some. Morrison's tone carried an edge. Not cruel, but testing. "Lady, with all due respect, this is 3,000 meters with an unpredictable crosswind and technical variables that—" 3,027 meters. She interrupted quietly. "Given the elevation change between firing position and target, you're actually shooting a ballistic trajectory that requires compensation for—" "We know the math," Trent said. "What's your point?" She looked past them at the distant target, at the empty desert beyond, at the sky beginning its slow fade toward twilight. "My point is you're using the wrong rifle for these conditions." Silence. "The MK-15 is excellent," she continued, "but it's designed for consistency, not adaptation. The barrel harmonics, the action speed, the weight distribution, everything about it assumes good conditions with minor variable compensation. What you need out here is something that works with the environment instead of trying to dominate it." Rodriguez laughed, short and sharp. "So what, you've got a magic rifle that ignores physics?" She didn't smile. "No, I have a rifle that understands them." The canvas bundle shifted in her hands. Whatever was inside was long and heavy, rifle-sized. Trent felt the situation slipping into territory he didn't quite control. "If you're suggesting you can make this shot—" "I'm not suggesting anything, sir. I'm offering a demonstration." She met his eyes directly. No challenge, no bravado. Just statement of capability. "If I miss, you've lost nothing but 3 minutes. If I make it, maybe you learn something." The audacity of it hung in the air. A range maintenance worker, a civilian, a woman, someone who'd spent the day cleaning spotting stations, claiming she could succeed where 8 Navy SEALs had failed. Morrison's jaw tightened. "This is a closed qualification course." "I have range clearance," she said. "I can shoot here legally. Whether you observe or not is your choice." Trent should have shut it down. Should have cited regulations, chain of command, the dozen reasons why allowing an outsider to attempt a course designed for naval special warfare operators would create paperwork nightmares. But something stopped him. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the nagging awareness that nothing they'd tried today had worked. Maybe just the bizarre confidence radiating from this woman who seemed utterly unbothered by the scrutiny of 12 elite warriors. "You've got 3 minutes," he said. "Miss, and you're off this range permanently." "Understood, sir." She moved to the firing line with economical grace, no wasted motion. She set down the canvas bundle and began unwrapping it with careful hands. What emerged made several of the SEALs blink. Not a MK-15, not any current military rifle, a Winchester model, 1895. The classic lever-action design that Teddy Roosevelt had carried on safari over a century ago, but modified extensively. The stock had been reshaped, darkened with use and oil. The barrel was longer than standard, free-floated and wrapped in some kind of specialized shroud. The action had been reworked, tightened, perfected. Modern scope mounts had been integrated so seamlessly they looked original. The scope itself was military-grade but older, marked with serial numbers that predated modern digital ballistics computers. "You're kidding," Davis breathed. She ignored him. From a leather pouch at her belt, she produced 5 cartridges. Not .338 Lapua. These were longer brass cases that caught the light like old gold. 30-06, Morrison said, recognition dawning. "You're shooting a 100-year-old rifle chambered in." "It's not about the caliber," she said, loading the first round into the chamber with a smooth lever action. "It's about knowing what you're shooting." She moved behind the rifle without hesitation. No adjustment period. No familiarization. She dropped to prone position like she'd done it 10,000 times, settling into the weapon like it was an extension of her body. No spotter, no rangefinder check, no wind meter reading. She simply looked downrange through the scope for 30 seconds of absolute stillness. The SEALs watched. Some skeptical, some curious, all of them professional enough to suspend judgment until she actually pressed the trigger. She didn't press it. She squeezed, slow, steady, with the kind of control that comes from muscle memory burned so deep it operates below conscious thought. The Winchester roared. It wasn't the crisp crack of a modern precision rifle. It was a deeper boom, rolling across the desert like thunder, stirring up dust and memories of an era when warfare was fought with iron sights and instinct. The recoil drove her shoulder back. The lever action worked. Smooth, practiced, ejecting the spent brass and chambering the next round in one fluid motion. But she didn't shoot again. She waited. 4 seconds. At 3,000 meters, that's how long it took for truth to travel. The steel target rang, not a brush, not a near miss that made men wonder if they'd heard an echo. A clean, undeniable hit. The metallic clang carried across the empty miles like a bell announcing arrival. Then silence. Complete, total silence. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They all just stared downrange at a target they'd been trying to hit all day, now marked by a civilian woman with a rifle that belonged in a museum. She worked the lever action again, ejecting the unfired second round. Cleared the chamber. Set the safety. Then she stood, brushing dust from her pants with casual movements, like she'd just completed a basic qualification instead of something impossible. "Wind's about to shift northwest," she said quietly. "You'll have a 12-minute window starting in about 90 seconds. Gusts will drop to steady 6 knots. That's your opening." She started rewrapping the Winchester in its canvas covering. Trent found his voice. "Who the hell are you?" She paused, considering the question like it required thought. "My name's Sarah Redfeather. I work range maintenance here 3 days a week." "That's not what I'm asking." She finished securing the canvas, shouldering the rifle with practiced ease. "I know what you're asking, sir, but that's all the answer you're getting today." "That shot," Morrison started, "was 3,027 meters in unpredictable wind with a weapon platform you don't respect," she interrupted. "Same shot you've been missing all day. The difference isn't the rifle. It's understanding that sometimes the old ways work better than the new ones. Sometimes patience beats technology, and sometimes the people you don't notice are the ones you should pay attention to." She turned to walk away. "Wait," Trent commanded. She stopped but didn't turn around. "You're not just range maintenance." "Today I am," she said. "Tomorrow I might be something else, but right now your 90-second window is down to about 60 seconds. If someone's making this qualification, they should take position." She walked away then, back toward the supply point, the old Winchester on her shoulder like it weighed nothing. Behind her, 12 Navy SEALs stood in various states of shock, confusion, and, for some, something approaching respect. Davis grabbed his rifle. "Sir, permission to—" "Take the shot," Trent said. Davis dropped to position. Rodriguez scrambled back to spotting duty. But both of them were shaken, distracted by what they'd just witnessed. The wind had indeed dropped, just as she'd predicted. Steady at 6 knots from exactly 305 degrees. Davis missed by 2 inches. The best attempt of the day, but still not good enough. Morrison went next, then Patterson, then every other SEAL who'd failed earlier, drawn by the possibility that maybe, just maybe, the window she'd identified would be their salvation. All of them came close. Closer than before. But close wasn't qualification. The sun dropped below the rock formations, painting the desert in shades of orange and purple. Shadows lengthened. The day was ending. "Secure weapons," Trent finally ordered. "We'll try again tomorrow." Nobody spoke as they packed equipment. Nobody wanted to acknowledge what they were all thinking, that a civilian with a century-old rifle had succeeded where the Navy's best had failed. That somewhere in their training, their technology, their absolute confidence in modern warfare techniques, they'd missed something fundamental. Sarah Redfeather's pickup truck started with a rough engine cough. They watched it drive away, raising dust on the unpaved range road until it disappeared behind the rocks. "Background checker," Trent said quietly to Rodriguez. "I want to know everything. Where she trained, what she's qualified in, why she's working range maintenance when she can shoot like that." "Yes, sir." "And Rodriguez?" "Sir?" "Do it quietly. Something tells me we've just seen something we weren't supposed to see. And I want to understand what that means before word spreads." The SEALs loaded their vehicles and departed, leaving the range to darkness and silence. The target stood in the distance, marked by one perfect hit among a field of misses. And somewhere in the Nevada desert, a woman with an old rifle and secrets drove home alone, carrying knowledge these warriors were just beginning to comprehend. The background check came back blank, not incomplete, not classified, blank. Rodriguez had run every database available to Naval Special Warfare Command. Military service records, federal employment history, criminal background, Social Security cross-reference. Sarah Redfeather existed, birth certificate, driver's license, tax records, but her history read like someone who'd lived their entire life in administrative silence. Born 31 years ago on the Walker River Paiute Reservation in Nevada, graduated high school, no college records. Employed by the Nevada Test and Training Range as civilian maintenance staff for the past 6 years. Before that, sporadic employment history, ranch hand, hunting guide, construction worker. Nothing that suggested military training. Nothing that explained a 3,000-meter shot with a modified Winchester. "It's wrong," Rodriguez told Trent 2 days after the range incident. They stood in the NSWC administrative building, reviewing printed reports because even secure computers seemed like the wrong place for this conversation. Nobody shoots like that without serious training. Years of it. But there's no record of her attending any military school, no competitive shooting history, nothing. Trent studied the single photograph they'd found, a driver's license photo from 3 years ago. Sarah Redfeather looked directly at the camera with dark eyes that gave away nothing. High cheekbones, bronze skin, black hair. Pretty in an understated way that didn't seek attention. The kind of face that blended into crowds, that people saw but didn't quite register. "What about the rifle?" Trent asked. "That's even stranger. The Winchester Model 1895 isn't rare exactly. Winchester made about 425,000 of them between 1895 and 1931. But that specific configuration, modified for long-range precision work, we can't trace it. No serial number in any registry. Could be custom built, could be inherited. No way to know without seeing it again." "And the reservation?" "Tight-lipped. Spoke with the tribal council chairman. He confirmed she's enrolled, lives on reservation land. Wouldn't say more. Suggested we should mind our own business." Rodriguez hesitated. He used the term cultural privacy. Said some traditions aren't meant for outside scrutiny. Trent set down the reports. Through the office window, he could see the training compound where new SEAL candidates were running obstacle courses in the morning heat. Young men pushing their bodies to break through limits. Good men. But not one of them could have made that shot. "We're going back to the range tomorrow," Trent said. "Final qualification attempt. If we fail again, this whole precision rifle course gets reviewed, possibly suspended. I need to understand what she knows." "You think she'll be there?" "I know she will. She's scheduled to work, and something tells me she's expecting us." The Nevada high desert looked the same the next morning. Vast, empty, hostile to everything except the wind. The SEALs arrived before dawn, setting up equipment by flashlight and headlamp. Different day, same mission. 3,000 meters. One target. Pride on the line. Sarah Redfeather's pickup truck arrived exactly at 0700 hours. She parked in the same spot as before, emerging with the same canvas supply bag, the same worn work clothes, the same quiet efficiency. She didn't acknowledge them. Just went about her duties, checking equipment, replacing torn wind flags, sweeping out the spotting station. Professional, invisible. Trent let her work for 30 minutes before approaching. "Ms. Redfeather." She looked up from coiling a length of rope. "Lieutenant Commander, we need to talk." "About?" "About that shot you made 2 days ago. About your training. About why you're working range maintenance when you clearly have skills that—" "I work range maintenance because I like quiet work," she interrupted gently. "And because the reservation is 15 miles from here, which is close enough to go home every night." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer I'm giving." She finished coiling the rope, securing it with a practiced hitch knot. "Is there something you need for the range today, sir? I'm happy to help with equipment or logistics. I need to know how you made that shot." I pointed the rifle and pulled the trigger. "Ms. Redfeather." "Sarah." She stood, meeting his eyes with that same calm directness. "You can call me Sarah, and I understand what you're asking, Commander. You want to know if I can teach your men what I know, if there's some technique or secret that will help them qualify. But that's not how it works." "How what works?" She gestured at the vast empty desert around them. "This. All of this. Your men are excellent shooters. Their fundamentals are perfect. Their mathematics are correct. Their equipment is the best money can buy. But they're trying to conquer the range. They're trying to dominate variables, control outcomes, force success through superior training and technology. And that's wrong? It's incomplete." She picked up her supply bag. "The wind doesn't care about your training. The distance doesn't respect your equipment. The desert will kill you with indifference if you try to fight it. What works out here isn't domination. It's partnership, understanding, becoming part of the environment instead of trying to rise above it." "That's very philosophical," Trent said. "But philosophy doesn't teach marksmanship, doesn't it?" She tilted her head slightly, studying him. "Tell me, Commander, when your shooters miss, what do they blame?" "Variables. Wind shift, temperature change, equipment malfunction." "Exactly. They externalize failure. Something outside themselves went wrong. But when I miss, and I do miss sometimes, I know it's because I wasn't listening carefully enough. Wasn't patient enough. Tried to force a shot that wasn't ready to be taken." "You're saying shooting at this range is spiritual?" "I'm saying everything worth doing involves more than just mechanics." She started walking toward the supply shed. "Your men will qualify today, Commander. The conditions are right. Good luck." She disappeared into the shed before he could respond. Morrison took first position at 800 hours. The wind had indeed calmed overnight. Steady 8 knots from the north, no gusts. Ideal conditions compared to 2 days prior. He settled behind the MK-15 with Rodriguez spotting, running through his pre-shot routine with practiced precision. "Winds holding steady," Rodriguez confirmed. 8 knots, 015 degrees. Temp 64 and rising. Density altitude 7,200. Morrison made his calculations, adjusted his scope, controlled his breathing. Everything technically perfect. He squeezed the trigger with textbook form. Miss. 6 inches left. "Damn," Rodriguez breathed. Morrison rolled away from the rifle, frustration etched in his jaw. Everything was right. Everything. "Try again," Trent ordered. Take your time. Morrison took 3 minutes before his second attempt. He factored in the first miss, adjusted his windage, confirmed every variable. The shot broke clean. Miss, 4 inches right. He's overcorrecting, Davis murmured to Patterson, thinking too much. Then you try, Patterson shot back. Davis did. So did Patterson. So did every other SEAL who'd failed 2 days prior. And they all came close. Closer than the first day. Closer than should have been possible with their level of training. But close wasn't qualification. Close was failure with a shorter distance. By 1100 hours, frustration had turned to something darker. Not anger, but the corrosive doubt that comes when proven skills suddenly seem inadequate. These were men who'd performed impossible tasks in impossible places. They'd fast-roped from helicopters at midnight, cleared buildings under fire, made split-second decisions that saved lives and ended missions. But this one shot, this simple technical challenge, was breaking them. Break for 15, Trent announced. Clear your heads, we go again at 11:15. The SEALs moved away from the firing line, finding shade under the equipment tent, drinking water they didn't taste. Nobody spoke. The weight of repeated failure sat heavier than any tactical load they'd ever carried. Sarah emerged from the supply shed with a cooler. Brought extra water, she said. Figured you'd need it. We need a lot of things, Morrison said, more bitterly than he intended. Water's not one of them. She set the cooler down anyway. Dehydration affects cognitive function, makes you think harder instead of clearer. We're thinking plenty clear, Davis said. Clear enough to see we're missing a 3,000-meter shot we should be making. Should be making, Sarah repeated. Interesting phrase. Implies entitlement, like the universe owes you success because you've trained hard and carried the right credentials. Rodriguez bristled. We've earned our credentials. I don't doubt it. She pulled out a water bottle, took a slow drink. But earning something in one context doesn't mean it transfers to all contexts. A fish that's excellent at swimming doesn't win races by running on land. You're trying to run when you should be swimming. Enough with the riddles, Morrison snapped. If you've got actual advice, give it. If not, leave us alone. Sarah looked at him for a long moment. Not offended, just evaluating. You want advice? Fine. Stop trying to make the shot. Start listening for when the shot wants to be taken. That's meaningless. Is it? She gestured at the distant target. Every time you get behind that rifle, you're telling the environment what you want. But you're not asking what it's offering. The wind has rhythms. The light has moods. The rifle has a personality you're ignoring because you think metal can't have character. You're so busy executing a perfect mechanical process that you've forgotten shooting isn't mechanics. It's conversation. Conversation with what? Trent asked, stepping closer. With everything. She looked at the desert, the sky, the invisible forces that moved across the range. My grandfather taught me to shoot when I was 8 years old. Same rifle you saw me use. He'd take me out to the desert before sunrise and we'd wait, sometimes for hours. I'd get impatient, want to shoot, prove I could hit whatever target he'd set. But he'd tell me to wait, to listen, to feel when the morning was ready. Your grandfather sounds patient, Rodriguez said, skepticism clear in his tone. He was a Marine, Sarah said simply. Served in Vietnam. Came home with 2 Purple Hearts and skills he never talked about. Spent the rest of his life teaching his granddaughter that warfare isn't about killing, it's about understanding. Understanding terrain, understanding enemy patterns, understanding when to strike and when to wait. The shooting was just an expression of that understanding. Silence fell across the group. The revelation hung in the air, unexpected, uncomfortable, suddenly making her less of an outsider and more of something they couldn't quite categorize. Your grandfather taught you military marksmanship, Trent asked carefully. My grandfather taught me to pay attention, she corrected. The marksmanship came naturally after that. He died 6 years ago. Left me his rifle and everything he knew about patience. She stood, brushing off her pants. Your break's almost over. If you want my advice, here it is. Stop shooting with your eyes. Start shooting with your instinct. The mathematics are important, but they're just framework. The real shot happens in the space between calculation and execution. That's where you'll find success. She walked away, back toward the supply shed, leaving 12 SEALs wrestling with concepts that didn't fit neatly into their training manuals. "She's full of it," Davis muttered. "Mystic Native American wisdom doesn't overcome wind drift." "Maybe not," Trent said slowly. "But her grandfather's Marine Corps training might. And whatever he taught her, it works." He checked his watch. "Time's up. Morrison, you're up again." Morrison approached the rifle differently this time. He didn't rush, didn't immediately drop into position. He stood for a moment just looking downrange, letting his eyes travel the distance without forcing focus. The wind flags hung limp, barely moving. The heat shimmer was less intense than earlier. The light had that mid-afternoon quality that flattened shadows and clarified distance. Something felt ready. He settled behind the rifle without analyzing why. Let his body find its natural position instead of forcing perfect form. The cheek weld came automatically. His breathing slowed without conscious control. Rodriguez started to call wind data, but Morrison held up one hand. "Wait." He looked through the scope, not at the target specifically, but at the space around it, at the quality of air, at the subtle movements that indicated environmental mood rather than just environmental data. His finger moved to the trigger, not with conscious thought, but with quiet certainty. The shot broke. For 4 seconds, time became elastic. Morrison didn't rush to ask if he'd hit. Rodriguez didn't immediately report impact or miss. They both just waited, listening. The target rang. Clean hit. Undeniable. Perfect. Morrison didn't react with excitement. He just nodded slowly, like confirming something he'd already known. "That's what she meant," he said quietly. "What?" Rodriguez asked. "The conversation. I stopped trying to dominate the shot and just let it happen." The other SEALs watched with new attention. Davis moved to the firing line next, carrying Morrison's unexpected success like a possibility he hadn't considered. He took his time, breathed, felt for the moment. His shot hit 6 minutes later. Then Patterson, then Rodriguez. One by one, the SEALs who'd been failing for 2 days found success, not by trying harder, but by trying differently. By listening to advice from a woman who worked range maintenance and carried her grandfather's memories in an old rifle. By 1,600 hours, every shooter had qualified. They stood together near the equipment tent, processing success that felt both earned and gifted. The target stood downrange, marked by hits that proved capability they'd always possessed but hadn't quite accessed. Sarah emerged from the supply shed for the last time that day, carrying her minimal gear. She walked to her pickup truck without looking at them, loading equipment with efficient movements. Trent jogged to catch her before she could drive away. "Sarah, wait." She paused, door half open. "Congratulations on your qualifications, Commander. Thanks to you. Thanks to patience." She climbed into the truck. "And maybe thanks to a dead Marine who knew that the best warriors aren't the ones who fight hardest. They're the ones who understand when not to fight at all. Your grandfather sounds like someone we could have learned from." "You just did." She started the engine. "His name was James Redfeather, by the way, Gunnery Sergeant, 3rd Marine Division. If you want to understand why I shoot the way I do, his service record will tell you everything you need to know, or nothing at all, depending on how you read it." "Why are you telling me this?" She considered the question, her hands resting on the steering wheel. "Because you asked, without demanding. Because you let your men fail until they found their own way. And because sometimes the world needs reminders that wisdom doesn't always come from the places we expect. Your mission out here is to create warriors. My mission is to remember that warriors can be created in many ways. Will you be here next time we train?" "I'm here 3 days a week," she said. "Whether you see me or not depends on whether you're paying attention." She drove away then, dust rising behind her truck like a question mark against the darkening sky. Rodriguez appeared at Trent's shoulder. "Found something interesting in the Marine Corps database, sir. James Redfeather. Confirmed Vietnam veteran. 2 Purple Hearts, like she said, but also recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross for actions near Khe Sanh. Classified details, but summary report mentions exceptional marksmanship under extreme conditions. Scout sniper qualified. multiple confirmed kills at ranges that, according to notes, shouldn't have been possible with the equipment available. So she wasn't exaggerating, Trent said. Sir, there's more. The rifle she's using? Winchester Model 1895 modified for military use? That's a Marine Corps Scout sniper rifle from the period. They modified a few dozen for special operations work before modern sniper systems were developed. Most were destroyed after Vietnam, but a few made it home with their operators. Trent watched the dust settle where her truck had disappeared. She's not just carrying her grandfather's rifle. She's carrying his legacy. Seems like it, sir. And she spends her days working range maintenance, staying invisible, until someone's arrogant enough to fail in front of her. Rodriguez almost smiled. Yes, sir. Trent turned back toward his team. They were securing equipment, their movements relaxed in a way they hadn't been for days. Success did that. Not just the qualification, but the understanding that came with it. That there were levels of mastery beyond technical perfection. That sometimes the best teachers came from unexpected places. Document everything from today, Trent ordered. Training notes, conditions, what changed in their approach. I want future courses to incorporate these concepts. How do we explain where the concepts came from, sir? We don't. We just say the desert taught us something important. He paused, and that we were finally ready to listen. They loaded vehicles as twilight claimed the range. Behind them, targets stood in the fading light, bearing the marks of both failure and success. And somewhere on the Walker River Paiute Reservation, a woman cleaned an antique rifle and spoke quiet words to the memory of a Marine who'd known that the most important lessons in warfare had nothing to do with winning. They had everything to do with understanding. The story should have ended there. 12 Navy SEALs qualified in extreme range precision shooting, lessons learned, mission complete. Return to base, incorporate new training methodologies, move forward. That's how military operations worked. Identify objective, achieve objective, debrief, next mission. But 3 weeks later, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Trent received a phone call that changed everything. Commander Trent, this is Admiral William Patterson, Naval Special Warfare Command. The voice on the phone carried the weight of authority earned through decades of classified operations. I need to speak with you about an incident at the Nevada training range approximately 3 weeks ago. Trent straightened in his office chair. Sir, if this is about the qualification course modifications, it's about Sarah Redfeather. Silence. I'm going to send you a file, Patterson continued. Classified, eyes only. After you've read it, we need to have a conversation about operational security and civilian military boundaries. The file arrived 30 minutes later through secure channels. Trent opened it alone, door locked, blinds drawn. What he read made him go back and read it again, certain he'd misunderstood. Sarah Redfeather, age 31, born Walker River Paiute Reservation. That part matched the background check, but the rest? Recruited by CIA paramilitary operations at age 19. Extensive training at Camp Peary, the facility officially known as The Farm, where the agency trained its most specialized operators. Skills assessment, exceptional aptitude for long-range reconnaissance and precision elimination. Deployment record, 12 operations across 4 continents, all classified above top secret. Official status, contract operator, non-attributable. Codename, Native Ghost. Trent's hands trembled slightly as he read through operation summaries so redacted they looked like black rectangles with occasional words. But what wasn't redacted told a story. Precision shots at ranges that tested credibility. Target eliminations in hostile territory where capture would have meant international incidents. Extraction operations where she'd provided overwatch for SEAL teams without those teams ever knowing she was there. One note stood out. Operator's preferred weapon platform is a modified Winchester Model 1895, chambered in 3006 Springfield. Despite recommendations for modern rifle systems, Operator achieves superior results with historical weapon due to extensive personal modification and unparalleled familiarity. Recommend approval for continued use. The recommendation was dated 6 years ago. Around the same time she'd started working civilian range maintenance in Nevada. Trent picked up his phone. Admiral, I've read the file. And? Patterson's voice gave away nothing. And I let a CIA paramilitary operator demonstrate sniper capability to my team without any awareness of her actual background. Sir, I need to understand why she's working range maintenance instead of conducting operations? Patterson interrupted. Or why the agency didn't inform you she'd be at that range? Both, sir. The second answer is simple. She shouldn't have been there. Her contract status was inactive. She wasn't assigned to observe or evaluate your training. She was genuinely working civilian maintenance because that's what she does now. Patterson paused. The first answer is more complicated. After her last operation, she requested contract termination, cited personal reasons. The agency granted it because you don't force operators with her skill level to continue against their will. Too many ways that goes wrong. What happened on her last operation? That's classified beyond your clearance, Commander. What I can tell you is that it involved a shot at 3,900 meters under conditions that should have made it impossible. She made it. Target was eliminated. Mission was successful. And she came back to headquarters 2 weeks later and requested immediate retirement from active operations. Trent thought about the woman who'd cleaned wind flags and avoided attention, who'd made a 3,000-meter shot look effortless, and then walked away like it meant nothing. She didn't retire, sir. She just changed battlefields. Explain. She's still operating, just differently. Teaching without saying she's teaching. Evaluating without announcing it. My team learned more from her in 2 days than they learned in 3 weeks of formal instruction. That was never her mission, Commander. Maybe not officially, but I think she's created her own mission, and given what she's capable of, trying to stop her seems counterproductive. Another pause. There's a reason I'm calling you directly instead of sending a security review team. Sarah Redfeather's contract is terminated. She's no longer subject to agency oversight. What she does as a civilian is technically not my concern, but keeping someone with her capabilities visible is strategically valuable. If she's working that range regularly, your teams train there regularly, and information transfers in ways that benefit operational readiness, I can't officially endorse that, but I can choose not to interfere with it. Trent understood. As long as operational security isn't compromised. Correct. Which means you need to have a very specific conversation with Ms. Redfeather about boundaries, what she can demonstrate, what she can't, what questions she can answer, and what she needs to deflect. Are we clear? Yes, sir. Good. Because if this situation becomes a problem, it becomes your problem. But if it becomes an asset, Patterson's tone shifted slightly. Then it becomes your asset. Use your judgment. The call ended. Trent sat alone in his office, processing information that recontextualized everything. The woman who'd seemed like an interesting civilian with unusual skills was actually one of the most dangerous operators in the American intelligence apparatus. And she'd chosen to step away from that life to clean shooting ranges and maintain equipment on a desert reservation. Why? He needed to know. And more importantly, he needed to understand what role, if any, she wanted to play going forward. The Walker River Paiute Reservation sprawled across Nevada high desert. 70,000 acres of land that looked empty to outsiders but held generations of history for those who knew how to read it. Trent drove through the reservation boundary at sunset, following directions to a property on the eastern edge where tribal records indicated Sarah Redfeather lived. He found it at the end of a dirt road that wound through sagebrush and volcanic rock. A small house, weathered but well-maintained, with a workshop building behind it and a covered porch that faced the sunset. Sarah's pickup truck sat in the driveway next to an older Jeep that had seen hard use. She was sitting on the porch when he arrived. Not waiting for him, just sitting, like she spent every evening there, watching light fade across land that belonged to her people in ways outsiders couldn't fully understand. "Commander," she said as he approached. Not surprised, not welcoming exactly, but not hostile either. "You're a long way from base. I need to talk to you. About who you really are." She didn't react, just gestured to the empty chair beside her. "Have a seat. Want something to drink? I've got water, beer, or coffee." "Water's fine." She disappeared inside, returning with 2 bottles. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the sky turn colors that had names in Paiute but not in English. "I received a classified file today," Trent said finally, "from Naval Special Warfare Command. It had your name on it. Your real name, and a lot of other information that explains why you can make shots my best shooters can't." "I see. Is that all you're going to say?" She took a slow drink. "What would you like me to say, Commander? That the file is wrong? That I'm just a civilian with good instincts? We both know better than that. I'd like to understand why someone with your background is working range maintenance instead of conducting operations that actually matter." "They all mattered," she said quietly. "That's part of the problem. Every target mattered to someone. Every shot I took was justified, necessary, preventing something worse from happening. I understood that intellectually. But after 12 years of mattering to people I never met, in places I couldn't talk about, for reasons I couldn't fully explain," she trailed off. "I got tired. Tired of being invisible except when I was killing someone. Tired of being valuable only because I could put a bullet through a target at ranges that seemed impossible. Tired of listening to congratulations from people who didn't understand what they were congratulating me for." She looked at him directly. "Do you know what it's like to be excellent at something that destroys you a little more each time you do it?" "I'm a SEAL," Trent said. "I have some idea." "Then you understand why I walked away. The last operation, the one that convinced me I was done, involved a target at 3,900 meters. That's over 2 miles. At that distance, you're not shooting a person. You're solving a complex mathematical problem that happens to have a human variable. Wind, temperature, barometric pressure, Coriolis effect, spin drift, all of it calculated to the millimeter. And I solved it. Put the bullet exactly where it needed to go. That's exceptional marksmanship." "That's exceptional distance," she corrected. "Marksmanship is personal. It's knowing your weapon, understanding your target, taking responsibility for the outcome. But at 3,900 meters, through a scope that makes everything abstract, it stops being personal. It becomes clinical. And I realized I didn't want to be clinical anymore. I wanted to be connected to the work I was doing." "So you took a job cleaning range equipment." "So I took a job where I could be useful without being invisible, where I could teach without being a teacher, where I could honor my grandfather's memory by helping warriors understand what he understood, that the weapon is less important than the mind using it." Trent leaned back in the chair. "The admiral who called me suggested we establish boundaries, that you could continue being present at the range, but within specific parameters that don't compromise operational security. And what do you think, Commander? Do you want me there? I think my team learned more from you in 2 days than they learned in 3 weeks of formal training. I think you have knowledge that's too valuable to stay buried. But I also think you need to decide what role you want to play, because I can't have a ghost on my training range. I need someone who's present, committed, willing to be acknowledged." She smiled slightly. "You want me to be visible. I want you to be whatever you need to be, as long as it helps my people become better at their jobs, which, given their jobs, means saving lives and completing missions that matter." Sarah stood, walking to the porch railing. She looked out at the darkening desert, at land her people had lived on for centuries, at sky that held stars not yet visible but soon to emerge. "I'll make you a deal," she said. "I'll continue working the range. I'll be available to consult when your teams train there. I'll demonstrate techniques, share knowledge, answer questions within the boundaries of what's appropriate. But I won't be official. No contracts, no formal position, no acknowledgement beyond what naturally occurs. I remain range maintenance. If your teams learn something from me, it's because they paid attention, not because I was assigned to teach them. That's acceptable. And in exchange, you respect that my past stays classified. My teams don't need to know who I was. They just need to learn what I can teach them. The legend of the native ghost doesn't exist here. There's only Sarah Redfeather, who happens to shoot well and knows some things about desert conditions." "Agreed." Trent stood as well. "But I need to ask, the 3,900-meter shot that made you walk away, what was the target?" She didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice carried weight that had nothing to do with distance or mathematics. A man planning to do terrible things. A man whose death prevented those things from happening. A man who was someone's son, brother, maybe father. I did my job perfectly, eliminated the threat, saved lives I'll never meet, and came home knowing I'd reached the absolute limit of what I was willing to become in service of objectives I couldn't fully understand. No regrets? Plenty of regrets. But not about walking away. That was the first right decision I'd made in years. She turned back to face him. Your SEALs are good men, Commander. They deserve to learn that being excellent at war doesn't mean you have to love it, that you can be the best warrior and still choose peace when the opportunity comes. That's what my grandfather taught me. That's what I'm trying to teach them. They shook hands, formal, but with understanding underneath. One more thing, Trent said before leaving. That Winchester you shoot. It really was your grandfather's? Gunnery Sergeant James Redfeather, 3rd Marine Division, Vietnam veteran. He carried it on operations when regulations allowed, then kept it for 30 years after he came home. He taught me to shoot with it when I was 8 years old. Every modification on it is something we did together. Every scratch in the stock is a memory. And every shot I take with it honors a man who understood that the measure of a warrior isn't how many enemies they defeat. It's how much they protect what matters. He'd be proud of you. He'd tell me I think too much and should just enjoy the sunset. She smiled slightly. He was probably right. Trent drove away as full darkness settled over the reservation. In his rearview mirror, he could see Sarah standing on her porch, silhouetted against the light from inside her house, looking out at a desert that held secrets she didn't need to share. The next 3 months changed how Naval Special Warfare Command approached long-range precision training, not through official policy changes or modified training manuals, through the quiet integration of concepts that came from a civilian contractor who cleaned equipment and occasionally offered observations. Sarah Redfeather remained exactly what she'd claimed to be, range maintenance staff. She showed up 3 days a week, did her job professionally, stayed mostly invisible. But when SEAL teams trained, when they struggled with distance shots or variable conditions, she was there, not teaching exactly, just present, making occasional comments, demonstrating when asked, walking away when her point was made. The team started calling her Redfeather, with the casual respect reserved for civilian specialists who proved their worth through results rather than credentials. Nobody asked about her background. Nobody pushed for information she didn't volunteer. They just learned. Wind reading became less about mathematics and more about environmental awareness. Equipment selection evolved from newest and best to most appropriate for conditions. Shooting philosophy shifted from dominating variables to working within them. Success rates improved, not dramatically. These were already elite operators, but consistently, measurably, in ways that translated to operational effectiveness. And every few weeks, when conditions were perfect and a particularly challenging shot presented itself, someone would look toward the supply shed and say, "Redfeather's watching. Better make this one count," which was its own kind of teaching. 4 months after their first meeting, Trent returned to the Nevada range for a specialized training evaluation. New candidates, new challenges, same unforgiving desert. He arrived early, before the teams, wanting to observe setup before operations began. He found Sarah replacing a wind flag on the far side of the range, working alone in early morning light. "Still maintaining equipment?" he called out as he approached. "Still the best job on the base," she replied, securing the flagpole. "Nobody tells me what to do. I set my own hours, and sometimes I get to watch very confident men learn humility." That last part sounds satisfying. It has its moments. She finished her work, standing and brushing off her hands. "Your new group arrives in 20 minutes. They look promising in the files." "You read their files?" "Range maintenance has access to training schedules and participant lists. Helps with equipment preparation." She smiled slightly. "Also helps me know who might need extra attention." They walked back toward the main facility together, comfortable silence between them. "Can I ask you something?" Trent said finally. "You can ask. No regrets about stepping away? About choosing this instead of continuing operations?" She considered the question carefully. "I have regrets about things I did. People I couldn't save, shots I missed, operations that went wrong despite perfect planning. But choosing to step back from that life, to honor my grandfather's legacy by teaching instead of executing, to be present instead of invisible. She shook her head. That's not a regret. That's the first honest decision I made in years. The admiral who called me, he said you could have continued operating indefinitely, that you're one of the best they've ever trained. I probably could have. But being the best at something doesn't mean you should keep doing it. Sometimes the courage isn't in taking the shot, it's in knowing when to put the rifle down. A convoy of vehicles appeared on the access road, carrying the new SEAL candidates, young men ready to prove themselves, ready to learn what they thought they already knew. They're going to underestimate you, Trent observed. They always do. Sarah picked up her supply bag. That's part of the lesson. Learning that expertise comes from unexpected places, that the people you don't notice might be the ones you need to pay attention to. And if they don't learn, then they'll keep missing shots until they figure it out, or they'll wash out. Either way, the range teaches what needs to be taught. She walked toward the supply shed, another day of invisible work ahead. Behind her, elite operators arrived to train, unaware that the most dangerous person on the range was the woman who'd clean their equipment and watch their failures with patient understanding. Trent watched her go, thinking about what it meant to be excellent, about the difference between skill and wisdom, about warriors who chose peace without surrendering their strength. And he thought about an old Marine who'd carried a Winchester through Vietnam and come home to teach his granddaughter that the most important targets weren't the ones you hit. They were the ones you chose not to shoot at all. That lesson, more than any precision rifle technique, was what Sarah Redfeather was teaching here, and that lesson was worth protecting. The sun rose higher over the Nevada desert, burning away morning shadows and revealing landscape in harsh, unforgiving clarity. On the range, SEALs prepared equipment and reviewed training objectives. 3,000 meters downrange, a target waited for bullets that would test skill, patience, and the difference between force and understanding. And somewhere between the firing line and that distant target, invisible unless you knew how to look, Sarah Redfeather went about her day, cleaning, maintaining, observing, and quietly ensuring that warriors learned not just how to make impossible shots, but why those shots mattered and when they shouldn't be taken at all. The Navy called it advanced precision rifle training. She called it honoring her grandfather. Both were correct. And in the space where military excellence met human wisdom, something important was being preserved, the understanding that the greatest warriors aren't the ones who never miss. They're the ones who know what's worth aiming at in the first place. The range stood ready. The students arrived. The lessons continued. And the native ghost, no longer ghost but present, no longer hidden but visible to those who chose to see, continued teaching the only way she knew how, through patience, respect, and the quiet certainty that some knowledge is too important to stay secret, even if it comes from a woman with an old rifle and a grandfather's legacy written in every perfectly placed shot.